So it had to be sometimes in March, maybe, that they came in. Then we saw them on the street.
I see.
Then I guess we knew that this is going to be very bad. And what's so strange that it happened before in so many countries, like in Slovensko, in Poland, and there were Jews running away, escaping. And they told the story. But for some reason, I guess the parents just didn't believe it. They just couldn't believe that something like this can really happen to ordinary people, hardworking people who had good relationships with other non-Jews. Why would they just be taken out of their home and killed? And so the whole thing looked like, a nightmare, but something that you will wake up and everything will be fine. So very naive, I think, most of the Jews were in our city. And by the time they realized that it's really dangerous and it's no escape, it was too late.
Did anybody run away?
They tried to run away, but it was very difficult. The borders were closed. You couldn't get passports or visas. There was nowhere to go unless you somehow cross the border with some illegal means, and of course families wouldn't take that chance with children. So it was like you were stuck. You had to live there. You could not move, and my mother was very attached to the grandfather, and that was another reason that she just wouldn't leave. She said, whatever happens with them will happen to us. That was the terror.
We talked a little bit. You said that upon returning from Poland with that adventure with your mother and brother, your mother really changed.
Yes, as I said, she was a very happy, outgoing person before. And when this happened, she changed. She was like a completely different person. First of all, she developed a heart problem. And I guess she was depressed. And then my father being away, of course, the whole situation was just terrible. But since I wasn't home, I don't know really how bad it was until they let me know that my mother went to Budapest to a sanatorium. That was like heart patients were cured there, also a Jewish hospital, that it got so bad that she just couldn't breathe, and she had these attacks. And since my brother was there, so she was with him. And we knew it's already going to be very bad. I came home from my school, from Munkács. My father was home at that time. And even though he kept telling my mother, stay in Budapest, because somehow in a big city maybe you can get lost easier, she wouldn't. She always said, whatever happens to the family, she wants to be part of it. She doesn't want to. She says life would mean nothing to be just surviving by herself. So she came home. And of course, as I say, we never believed that it could happen. But then after Passover in April, again, in the morning, they came, you pack your bag, you have an hour or hour and a half, and then you're going to go to a good place. Well, the good place was the synagogue. All the Jews were taken there.
Your synagogue?
In our synagogue. And also for a day or two we stayed there. No food, as you can imagine, after Passover. Nobody had bread, nobody had anything prepared. And We stayed there. I remember as on the street we were marching. Somebody asked some of the bystanders to give them some bread. They laughed. They just were laughing. They thought it's very funny. And after a couple of days from the synagogue, they took us to a neighboring city. That's where the ghetto was.
Where was that?
That was called Nagyszőlős. It was about 8-9 kilometers.
And how did you get there?
They took us with not even horse and buggy, but it was with cows were pulling the wagon.
Mm-hmm.
And there we had, usually women and children were on the wagon, the men were walking. And then they took us to this city where we were pretty familiar. We used to go there. My mother, seamstress, was living there and used to go to the movies there. It was a nice little town. They put us in a ghetto. It was a few streets. I don't know exactly how many, maybe 3-4 streets. Mostly Jews used to live there.
Mm-hmm.
And these homes were, of course, forced. The families, the non-Jews who ever lived there were forced out from that area, and then the Jews were all gathered from different cities, not just our city, but other cities also, until it was so packed that nobody could get anybody in. And we stayed there about 6.5 weeks.
And who stayed? You said that you were forced to live in a house, and who was in that house with you?
I don't know who else was in the house, but in one room, my grandparents, my aunt with her children, we were about 12 to 14 people living in one room.
And your father was with you too?
And my father was with us, my grandfather and my brother. But within very short time, they took the men away. And they were torturing them to tell where was hidden, if there was some valuable stuff given to others or hidden or wherever it is. So they were tortured. And they were let back with us just before they took us to the concentration camp. So by then, I remember my father all beaten up.
It sometimes helps if you take a drink of water.
My brother,
Your father was all beaten up?
and my grandfather, he was a very handsome, tall, at least 6 foot tall, very nicely built man. He was so old looking. Couldn't have been more than 60 years old, but he looked 100. My father was 42. My mother was 37. And they all went to the concentration camp. My brother somehow escaped from the ghetto. He had opportunity. He looked, didn't have the characteristics of a Jewish kid. He looked like one of them. dressed up as a peasant kid, and he went through the ghetto. The ghetto was, fenced in. Of course, soldiers were standing everywhere, but somehow he got out. And he went to one of the farmers that we knew. And I'm not sure how the farmer, or he just called the police, or the police happened to find that my brother was there. So they took him, beat him up, and they took him back to the ghetto. See, nobody was talking after they came back. It was silence. Father didn't complain, grandfather didn't complain, didn't say what really happened, but they were such broken people that we knew something horrible went on there. It was very well known that the police was very cruel in there, beating with all kinds of horrible weapons, and it was a terrible situation.
And when you finally, so you lived in this very
closed area where
for about 6 weeks.
6 weeks, approximately 6.5. It was between Passover and Shavuos.
And when were you actually taken to the concentration
That
camp?
was just at Shavuos time.
Which was 7 weeks later.
Later, right. And we were all hauled to the wagons again on the train. Awful lot of people in one wagon. I don't know, 60, 70 people. I have no idea how many there were. And I was with my mother, father, brother, so we were at least together. And then we arrived. It took about 3 days and 3 nights to get there.
How did you survive the wagon trip?
I don't know. I don't know if we probably had some food and some water. There was no way, everything had to be happening there. They wouldn't let us go down to relieve ourselves or anything. Everything had to be there in public. People were crying. People were just broken up and were just sitting on the floor and huddling.
And so you were on the train for 3 days?
Yes, approximately. I think it was about 3 days from my home, from Neuzerlösch till Auschwitz, Birkenau.
And were there any people in your car that died that you knew about?
I don't know. Maybe there were, because they were so crowded and it was so tight. You didn't know who is on this end. You just saw that little few people that nobody talked.
And you were still with your mother and brother and father?
Father, yes. That was until we arrived, and then
And you arrived in Auschwitz-Birkenau, and do you remember getting off the trains?
Yes, I do remember. As soon as we got off, they started pushing us. They said, women, go this way. Men, go this way. Older people, go that way. Babies, give up, babies. There were some of these workers that were from Poland and from Slovensko, who knew what's going to happen. We didn't. So they kept yelling at the women who had small babies. You give it to your mother, the baby. Of course, these young mothers wouldn't part with their children. So they forced them. They grabbed those babies and just threw them to the older people, because at least they thought these younger mothers can't survive. They knew what's going to happen with the older people.
And what happened to you and your mother?
My mother and I were going to the living side.
And
so did my father and brother were together. And so as we were getting closer to the barracks, we saw some strange looking people. We didn't know if they are women, men. They looked like people who are not from this world. Pale, bald, clothing. I mean, some of them wore the striped uniform, but most of them were just ragged looking, barefooted. I mean, it just didn't look like it's a human life. I mean, but as I'm thinking back, I don't think I was thinking. I don't think I was realizing what's going on. We just, like cattle, we were just pushed and telling us, go here, go there, and we just followed. And I remember they took us first to a barrack. That's where they shaved us. And my mother, and of course you had to strip completely, and my mother got hold of a handkerchief. So she was holding it, she wouldn't give it away. So there was a German SS woman, and she started beating her. To let go of that piece of rag, but she gave up. And they took everything, all the clothing and everything, shaven. I remember I didn't recognize my mother when I saw her first. And they put us in a barrack. Now, there were many other women like us. It took us a while to recognize each other. And first few days we didn't get anything to eat, nothing. And then after, I don't know how many days, they gave us some slop, something nobody could eat. And it was bitter, it was horrible, some kind of soup. And then each barrack, there were about 23 or 25 barracks in each. We were in Lager C, and each barrack had, I don't know, 1,000 women. And in our barrack, the Lagerälteste, that means one of the leaders, said that, don't you know what's happening? Don't you know they burning you? Burning in the crematorium, because we smell. You could smell the flesh burning, but we didn't know what it is. And so the life started there. A little soup once in a while, maybe a piece of bread. And we lived again on the floor in that barrack. It was just, I don't think it was wood, I think it was just dirt floor. It remember it was raining and it was mud puddles and water puddles and cold and miserable, and it was just horrible, horrible. But we just, like zombies, we were just doing what they told us to do.
Do you remember being frightened?
I don't remember just fear as fear. I just knew it. Who cares? I mean, there was no willpower. There was just sort of lifeless. Some people within a few days sort of got back there. They could think, they could function. It took me much longer. And then, as I said, my mother already was having a problem with her heart. It started coming back, and she had all these attacks, and we found out that in another barrack are some of my aunts and cousins. So every day in the morning, early morning before the light came up, they made us stand outside naked. Selapel, they were called. Selapel means they counted. Everybody had to be in their place. If somebody was missing, then we stood there for hours and hours until they found maybe that person went over to the other barrack. So after a few weeks, my mother just said she cannot take it. She has to go for some medical treatment. Even though these leaders there said, don't go to any, because that means end. But she wouldn't believe it. She just couldn't believe it. And we all thought that it's because then, the Germans started saying, people who are sick, people who cannot take it, volunteer will take you to a hospital and you'll be feeling better and you're going to see your children, you're going to see your parents. All kinds, this kind of brainwashing. And I myself, as I say, I couldn't believe this is real and this is really, people are being murdered. So when my mother said that she has to go to the hospital, I let her. Not that I could have stopped her, but I helped her to go. I remember she had to walk to the end of this lager where they were waiting for these people who were hopeless, helpless. She said, go to your aunts. And that's the last time I saw her. I went to my aunts, who were a little bit more, they knew a little bit more about the life in the camp because they were there about 2 weeks before us. So one of them worked in as people were coming with their luggage, there were pillows and blankets and stuff like that. So what they had to do is to take out the feathers from the pillows, because all those pillows were made with feathers, and just the cloth. The cloth was put separately and the feathers separately. So my aunt, 3 of them, were working there. And because they were working there, they had a little more privileges. What they did, they stole some of these pillowcases, and what we used it for to cover our heads, because everybody was bald. And so for that we could get something, a piece of bread, something, people were like selling those. Anyway, we worked there for a while until we were in Auschwitz, in Birkenau, till about September. And then in September, but they had all these tricks, you volunteer, pretty hands, pretty faces, and we were so stupid and so naive. We thought it's really something. So what they did, the more attractive people, they went to a worse camp, or they asked professionals who are doctors, who are this, so they put them to clean the latrine, or just to disgrace, to constantly humiliate people. I mean, that was their purpose.
Well, Lily, we've finished the second tape.
Good.
So it's
I'm
time.
just shaking inside. I can't talk anymore.
Okay, one second. My mic came. Okay, today is December 10th, 1995. The survivor is Lily Wider. Her last name at birth was Kornguth. My name is Roberta S. Berger. The city is Dallas, Texas. The country, United States of America. Primary language is English. Lily, when we ended the last tape, you were talking about being in Auschwitz, and that you had said goodbye to your mother as she went to the hospital, and you went back to your aunts. And your aunts sort of got you some work in taking care of pillows.
Yes, sort of emptying the feather from the pillowcases.
And did you do anything with the feathers?
I don't know what happened to the feathers. I just know that the actual pillowcases, they were valuable, and that was a very, very precious thing to have, because, as I say, you could make something from it, like a scarf over your head, or even a dress, somebody who knew how to sew.
Did you have the ability to sew?
We didn't, but some people who worked there were SS women, and when they found a good seamstress, they let her do some work for them, dresses or skirts or something. And so they took home with them. They had the opportunity to take a little thread and needle, and so they sold it for a piece of cloth, and this how it went on.
Oh, I see.
For survival.
So there were, some of the women worked at sewing,
Yeah.
and so you were able to
Get-
use this needle and thread from
Yes,
time to time.
Yes, yes.
And how long did you work at that? How long were you in that warehouse with your aunts?
Well, they kept, as I say, these seal appels, they kept saying, who would volunteer to go to a better place where you will be able to work? Because here there was no work. This was just existing. I mean, this
Most of
happened. Yeah, most people were
did-
doing nothing, absolutely nothing. There was nothing to do. There was just standing around, not talking much, because nobody had the energy to talk. And so we always said, okay, let's try, maybe it's going to be better. But we always tried to stay together. My aunts, 3 aunts.
These were your mother's sisters.
They were sisters, yes. And as we went to another camp, It was no better, believe me.